think I was supposed to hold it till it turned green, but I couldn't see it. We'll see what happens there. I'm going to wake this up in case I need to use it. Or not. I don't know if that's y'all's or mine. Technology hates me, and I hate it back. It's really cool. All right. Now we'll find that. There we go. So let's talk about the elephant in the room first of all. I tore my arm teaching jiu-jitsu at the police academy. I probably heard it originally running an auger, but I'm a chaplain with Huntsville Police Department. I'm not a shooter, I'm not an operator, I'm not a cop, but I've been wrestling and fighting cops at the academy for 100 years. And when they let the Gracie boys come in and certify some of them as instructors, they knew that I did jiu-jitsu, so they invited me to go to the class, and then they said, well, why don't you teach the second shift class? Our police chief wants our officers to be safe, so he lets them do jiu-jitsu. Now, if you took private lessons from me, at my rank, it would cost you $140 an hour. Our chief pays his officers to take jiu-jitsu. So if you're on shift while my class is being taught and you don't work in any calls, you can come into my class, enroll, and the chief lets you get paid to learn how to survive and take care of yourself. If you're off shift and come to my class, he'll give you an hour and a half of comp time. And so one of the things I do at the police department is I teach Gracie survival tactics, and I probably heard it running an auger, but it popped while I was wrestling this young kid, and so my elbow bone separated because of the tricep tear, and they stuck it back together with some super glue, so I'm wearing this for about 6 weeks. I'm not an Auburn fan. Listen to my podcast, Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure, and the episode, The Elephant Not in the Room. I left a jiu-jitsu class, and I didn't have any clothes for the office, so I went to the mall. And my daughter buys me these shirts with little horses on them and guys with hammers. And I went, oh my, that's ridiculous what she pays for those shirts. So I'm not going to pay for that for a shirt. So I go to a sporting goods store. And I despise the Alabama A. Now, I'm an Alabama fan, but it's like they got to the thing where the guy had to design the logo. He goes, that was today? And then, that's the worst logo I've ever seen in my life. So I just don't wear it. And this dark blue shirt worked for me. I can ignore this. So I bought it. My wife said, hey, I like that dark blue color on you. You should wear it. So it's in the rotation, but I'm not an Auburn fan. That's that out of the way. All right. Third thing is, just by way of introduction, I'm a licensed professional counselor. I've been in private practice for 24 years. Now, my business is a combination of therapeutic interventions and consulting. One of my largest consulting clients is the city of Huntsville. I teach in a program called Crisis Intervention Training, or CIT International. And we certify police officers in how to deal with people who are in mental health crisis and a cop get dispatched to that call. I teach the mental health end of it. And then we teach some de-escalation training, and it's based in officer survival. So some of my observations come from that skewed perspective of interfacing with law enforcement. People say mental illness is not a crime. I agree. Quit calling the cops. But if you've got a family member that's mentally ill, and it's 2:30 in the morning, and you call me, that's a very expensive phone call. Okay? I charge by the hour when I'm up and awake and it's daylight. If you call me and I get out of bed from snuggling with Miss Jones and drive across town at 2:30 in the morning, that's an expensive phone call. Do you know what it costs to dial 911? And if you dial 911 because someone is acting in a way that scares you, they have 3 options. They send you a young person with a fire hose, they send you a young person with a box of Band-Aids, a paramedic, or they send you a kid with a badge and a gun. guess who they send 97% of the time? A kid with a badge and a gun. You're already asking for somebody to come and handle something that you can't handle, so there's implied use of force. So a young police officer rolls up on the scene, gets out, and a guy is acting in an unpredictable way. Scary people are unpredictable. Unpredictable people are dangerous. Not because they're mean or criminal. That's just the way it is. The most dangerous person in a jiu-jitsu gym is not a black belt. It's a white belt. Because they're spazzy and they don't know what they're doing. And unpredictable people will hurt you. So a cop gets out and he's been trained at the academy. Ask, tell, make. Done. I ask you, I tell you, I make you. Okay? And when you're there and he's not aware that you're in a mental health crisis, but someone's called you and you're wielding a knife or wielding a gun or wielding a broken bottle or you're knocking holes in the wall, he has a limited skill set. Ask, tell, make. And he has a Batman belt. And he can incapacitate you, he can immobilize you, or he can do other things to you. Okay? And so that's where I come in teaching the cops. Well, as we turn out, most people, not just the cops, don't understand mental illness. Most people don't understand mental illness. So let's talk about some rules of engagement. If, and again, that's a big if, okay? If I write this word on the board, what are the thoughts that come to your mind? And I mean, you can speak freely. We're not going to be offended. But let's be honest. When you say, hey, you're rolling up to a house, you're dealing with a person. This person walked into your church and they are quote unquote mentally ill. What's that reaction you have in your gut?
Unstable.
Pardon?
Unstable.
Unsafe. What else?
Suicidal.
Could be self-harm or suicidal.
Homicidal.
What else? What?
Homicidal.
Homicidal.
Homicidal. What else? Delusional. And we'll talk about some of these specific things. Anything else?
Depressed.
Pardon?
Depressed.
Could be depressed. Anybody use the word psycho?
Traumatized.
Traumatized. That's very insightful. Okay? So yeah, when you hear, hey, this person is mentally ill. Now you ask that to a room full of cops, but you can't write it on the board. I'll tell you that right now. So let's suppose that somebody walks in our back door and they have cancer. What do you think? They're sick. What else?
Struggling.
They're struggling.
Hopeless.
They may lack hope.
Dying.
Pardon?
Dying.
They're dying. And implied in that, we give them some compassion. What else?
Scared.
They're scared.
Rock bottom.
How can we help?
They what?
Rock bottom.
Rock bottom. They're a hero. They're a survivor. And they're brave. What's the difference in the two sides of the board?
Perception.
Absolute perception. Absolute lack of information. Now, we're going to have to make a caveat. We're going to have to say, all right, let's make sure that we understand true mental illness versus maladaptive behavior. Okay? But if we're talking about true mental illness, what we're talking about then is an indigenous condition. An indigenous animal came with the state of Tennessee. Rabbits, foxes, squirrels, not coyotes, not armadillos. Okay? Not Asian carp. An indigenous species. Some people come into the planet and they have an indigenous condition in the wiring of their brain or their brain chemical processing. Sometimes we call that an organic condition. Now, what's an organ in your body?
Something that keeps
Your
you
liver.
alive.
Let's see, the liver, left is liver again. Okay. Liver, pancreas, spleen, kidneys, heart, lungs. What's this thing right here?
Brain.
It's a brain. It's an organ. If you are mentally ill and it's true mental illness versus maladaptive behavior, a true mental illness is an organic condition and it is no different than having cancer or hypoglycemia or diabetes or insulin insufficiency or celiac disease. And for you as a Christian to walk up to somebody who's mentally ill and judge them on their faith or their character or their spirituality would just like you walking up to somebody who's suffering from cancer and going, well, have you tried not having cancer? Have you tried not being depressed? Have you tried not being anxious? Have you tried not being delusional? Have you prayed hard enough for the voices to go away? If it is an illness, it is an illness. Now, I'm going to make an assumption, and you'll have to ask your elders to agree or disagree with this. It's okay. I've got the assumption that the majority of what the New Testament talks about in relationships falls under the bell curve of normalcy. The New Testament does not address narcissistic personality disorder. The New Testament does not address what happens if you're married to somebody who's a bipolar personality, or a borderline personality, or a sociopath, or a psychopath. The New Testament doesn't talk about how you deal with a child who's mentally retarded. The New Testament doesn't talk about how to deal with somebody with epilepsy or Tourette syndrome. When the New Testament writers were talking, the assumption was made that we're talking to people who have the ability for free will and self-governance. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. Paul writing to the young preacher who has some anxiety issues or at least some self-esteem issues. And Paul writes to Timothy and says in verse 7, God has not given us a spirit of timidity, cowardice, or fear, but He's given us a spirit of power, of love. One version says sound mind. One version says self-control. If you possess the ability for a sound mind, self-control, and self-discipline, you're not mentally ill. If you don't possess that, then you are. There's an old training video that says if your mission is to climb a tree, you can hire a squirrel or train a horse. A horse does not have the capacity to climb a tree ever. There are some people who don't possess the capacity for self-governance. Now, how do you tell the difference? I use a pretty simple idea when I try to figure out, okay, do I think this is mental illness or do I think this is maladaptive behavior? And by the way, if I could tell 100% of the time this is true mental illness, this is maladaptive behavior, then instead of hamburgers tonight, we get on my helicopter and fly somewhere. Because I'd be a wealthy little bald dude. But here's working definition for that. We talk about a thing called emotional intelligence. Okay? Now, teenagers, close your ears. Your SAT, I didn't really mean it, sweetheart. You don't have to. Your SAT, your ACT, and your GPA are not a predictor of success. There are people with 160 IQ who regularly work for people with 100 IQ. C students rule the world because they have emotional intelligence. They can relate to people. If you understand all the intricacies of quantum physics, but you can't have a conversation with somebody across dinner, all your knowledge does you no good. Okay? If you can read music but can't sing, what good is it? All right? And so when you start talking about emotional intelligence, number one is, do you recognize and can you process your own emotions? Can I label my emotions? I'm scared, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm disappointed. And do you understand that your emotions are information rather than instruction? Now, immature people often use their emotions as instruction. That doesn't mean they're mentally ill, that just means they're immature or maybe maladaptive. The difference between information and instruction, if I'm driving back to Huntsville tomorrow, I'm 59, I won't make it without stopping at a gas station. Okay, so I get out of the car, I text my wife, stopping at a gas station. 40 minutes later, I get back in the car. I'm back in the car. She says, what took you so long? I walked in, there was a sign that said clean restrooms. I had to get them off in a bucket, some rubber boots. I didn't have any gloves. She'll say, no. The sign did not tell you to clean the restrooms. The sign told you the restrooms were clean. When I understand that my emotions tell me something, but don't tell me to do something, then I've got a person who has emotional insight. And just because I'm sad doesn't mean I have to act sad. You are not your emotion. I'm a person. I feel sad. I'm a person, I feel anxious. Your diagnosis is not your identity, ever. And if you run into people who lead with their diagnosis, then they lack a certain degree of self-identity, they lack a certain degree of self-insight, or sometimes they're using that to their advantage. And so people who understand their own emotions, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm happy, I'm glad, I'm disappointed. Well, guess what? I don't feel like working out. But if I only worked out when I felt like it, I would never work out. Okay? My dad's a chronic pain patient. Dad will say, let's go hunting. I said, Dad, doesn't it hurt to sit in a deer stand? He said, it hurts the same amount sitting in a deer stand as it does sitting in the house. Dad, doesn't it hurt to sit on a church pew? It hurts the same on a church pew as it does my couch. I'll go to church. And so understanding your own emotion. Now, once I have insight into me and understand my own emotions, I fall under that normalcy of the bell curve. Once I understand my emotions, I respond to my emotions with self-regulation. And self-regulation has several components. Self-regulation component number one is delayed gratification. It's the ability to delay what I want right now for what I want most. Adam and Eve, Esau, Elijah. Elijah says it is enough. Jesus says it is finished. Look at the book of Hebrews. Put away the sin that easily besets us. James chapter 1, we're drawn away by what we want and enticed. So here I have these emotions, and I understand those are my personal emotions. They're information, they're not instruction. And just because it gives me this thing that I want, I can delay gratification. Number two, impulse control. Just because I'm mad, I don't get to throw it. Just because I'm angry, I don't get to punch it. Just because it's hard, I don't get to quit. Just because you, quote unquote, made me mad, I don't get to say anything. Because if I understand my own emotions, I understand that, and anger control is not being angry. And for years we've taught we've said, Christians shouldn't be angry, Christians shouldn't be anxious, Christians shouldn't be fearful. No. Courage is not the absence of fear. If you've never been afraid, you just ain't been outside much. Okay? If nothing scares you, you're psychotic. You're not super smart, all right? Courage is being able to act appropriately when you are afraid. Not being angry means I don't let anger drive the bus. I recognize I'm angry. Be angry and sin not. Don't let the sun go down upon your wrath. Godly sorrow, guilt, works repentance that leads to salvation, not to be regretted. When I feel guilty about something, instead of disengaging, instead of hiding in shame, instead of running from the church, I change. I do something positive. So I understand my emotions. My emotions lead to delayed gratification. My emotions lead to impulse control. And my understanding of myself and my emotions also leads to a thing called motivation. And motivation is basically, can I put in hard work to get a long-term result? Parents, your job for your children is not to prepare the path for them. We used to talk about helicopter parents, now we talk about lawnmower parents. They cut down all the tall weeds. No. You're preparing your children for the path. And intentional adversity makes real adults. Moses shows up at a well outside of Midian. And he watches a drama unfold as some shepherds come out and run some girls away and water their flocks after the girls have done all the hard work, and then leaves. And Moses sees this and he intervenes and runs the shepherds off. When the girls get home, they're home early, and their dad says, "Why are you home early today?" Because typically they come home after dark. And when they come after dark, he said, "Girls, why are you late?" And the girls go, "The shepherds." "Oh, the shepherds again." Yeah. There's this ongoing bullying problem with the shepherds at the well. But guess what? Jethro of Midian did not go camp out by the well and thump the shepherds. He let his daughters learn how to handle it. It's called learning to adult. And your job is not to prepare the path for your children, but to prepare your children for the path. And so learning motivation, and sometimes I have to put in hard work. You've got to do your freshman year on the bench before you get on the hardwood. You've got to be the bottom guy on the totem pole before you think about being a mid-level manager. You've got to do your part at everything that you do in order to earn your reps and earn your sweat equity in anything you get. And if you can't put in long-term motivation to get a long-term result, you're not going to be a very successful person. Now, a person who can do those things can probably recognize emotions in other people. I can walk into a room and go, she's uncomfortable, she's happy, she's mad, and respond to those people from their perspective. What we teach the cops in de-escalation is they're trained to confront like this, and we get them to do this. By the way, that's a good way to be a parent. When your kids are in crisis, instead of giving them adultisms, figure out what their perspective is. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to think it's right. You don't have to think it's rational or reasonable. But you can tell your kids, oh, I get you're upset about this. Now, as a 59-year-old adult, it wouldn't upset me. But if I were 12, I'd probably be upset about it. My wife has a degree in biology. She taught honors biology in the freshman academy at Grissom College prep class. She is unreasonable when it comes to spiders. I can explain to my wife there are only 2 venomous spiders in Alabama, brown recluse and black widow. I can explain to her there are no poisonous spiders anywhere. Poison is something you eat, it kills you. Venom is something that injects and makes you sick. So spiders aren't poisonous. You can eat them all day like Skittles. Okay? They're not poisonous, they're venomous. She don't want to have that discussion. Honey, that's just a wolf spider. We can argue about how she's reacting to the spider, or I can go, I bet you're afraid of that spider and don't want it on our picnic table. Done. That doesn't mean I think she's rational. That doesn't mean I think she's reasonable. But I respond to it from her perspective. If I have the ability to look at you and go, hey, they're mad, sad, happy, disappointed, upset, and I can respond from their perspective, that's the thing that we call empathy. And if I can do that with other people, then I'm probably a functional adult in society. If I can't, if I don't possess that capacity, self-insight, self-regulation, delayed gratification, impulse control, motivation, and empathy, if I can't do that, for whatever reason, it's just not working, I'm mentally ill. If I haven't learned to do that, if I've adapted my behavior in such a way that I don't do that because it gets me something I want, then that's what we call maladaptive behavior. Does everybody understand the difference in those two? So there's some things we don't do, and there's some things we can't. I can't dunk a basketball. Okay? So if it's something that I don't possess the ability to do, it doesn't make me weak or broken or faithless. It just means that's not my sport. Okay? God will not hold you accountable for that which you are not responsible. God will not hold you accountable for that which you are not responsible, because He gave us a spirit, power, love, and of self-control. And if you don't possess the ability for self-control, God will not send you to hell because of something you can't modulate. You got to wrap your mind around that, because it changes a lot of what your perspective is going to be about a lot of the things that you run into. And it's hard to do with like mental illness when you talk about schizophrenia or something like that. But let's talk about one of the categories of what we call mental illnesses, and that's neurodevelopmental disorders. A neurodevelopmental disorder it comes in one of 2 flavors. It's a brain that did not grow up, didn't meet the mile markers, or it's a brain that's been on the planet so long it's starting to degrade its functionality. It's either too young a brain or too old a brain. If I've got a 35-year-old body, but an 8-year-old brain, and I've been through puberty, will I do some inappropriate things if I don't have somebody with me all the time? And God's going to send that dangerous innocent to hell because he lusts, or he looks at dirty pictures, and he's got the self-control of an 8-year-old? Your 95-year-old grandfather, who was an elder in the church, loses the prefrontal cortex of his brain and begins to cuss like a sailor. His soul's not in jeopardy at all. The maker of the universe understands that this temporal body we live in is designed to wear out. So when we start looking at mental illness and you start talking about, okay, we're dealing with a person and they are truly mentally ill, they are spiritually safe. Period. End of line. And you don't have to worry about it. And the church doesn't seem to understand that. We tend to lump all behavior that makes us uncomfortable into sinful behavior. And that's why I believe what was written in the New Testament was written for people inside the bell curve of normalcy. And we'll talk about that in our second session when we come back from the break. And we'll do an exegesis of Romans 12. I believe Romans 12 is a description of what a spiritually healthy and mentally healthy person looks like as they operate with society. So as we talk about mental health, let's talk about 4 broad categories, okay? Number 1, we have mood disorders. Number 2, we have personality disorders. Number 3, we have psychotic disorders. And then we have neurodevelopmental. So, mood disorders. How do you know what you're dealing with? And we're not hoping that you walk out of here with the ability to diagnose, okay? But this will just give you some idea of what a mood disorder is any person who has trouble having relationships with their own emotions. A person who has a mood disorder does not really do well with responding to their emotions. They become a place where their emotions control them rather than controlling their emotions. That's when you're talking about clinical depression, bipolar depression, dysthymia, maybe even some anxiety discussions. You let a person with obsessive compulsive disorder read the passages in the Bible that say, do not worry, and that adds another obsession to their life. That's not what the Bible's talking about when it says don't worry. It's not talking about people who have a brain mechanism that makes them worry in ways that you can't understand. A person with obsessive compulsive disorder has if they think it, it's real to them. And you can't understand that because your brain doesn't work that way. Terrible confession. I'm driving down the road and I go by a guy riding a bike. I'm sorry, there are bike trails in Huntsville. Don't ride on my road. Don't block my traffic. If I ever see one of those guys look like he's having a good time, I may try to ride a bike, but I've never seen anybody look like he was having a fun time. But when I go by that guy and he blocks traffic for 9 miles, I think, I should open the door. It's terrible. I should have bicycle stickers on my bumper. I would do that, okay? But I realize that's not something I should do. My clients with obsessive compulsive disorder will come to my office and go, hey, I rode by a guy on a bike and I thought I opened the door and hit him. Did you open the door? I don't know. Is there a dent in your door? No. Is there paint on your door? No. I drove by 3 times and looked for the guy. He's not there. Then you didn't hit him. But his mind loops in a way that says, I can't distinguish reality from a thought. And they suffer from what's known as intrusive thoughts. And intrusive thoughts hits a person who suffers from obsessive compulsive disorder. Obsession is the thought. It feels anxiety. You realize, hey, if I touch this, I feel better. That's the compulsion. They're totally unrelated. And so obsession gets linked with compulsion and it goes away. Now, if you are a little bit afraid of germs, or you're afraid of snakes, or you're afraid of spiders, or you bathe in hand sanitizer since COVID, you're probably not OCD. But it's when your thought always leads to a catastrophic end. That's when you tell you're wading into the waters of OCD. Okay, so mood disorders are people who have trouble having relationships with their own emotions. Personality disorders are people who have trouble having relationships with relationships. Or they have trouble with other persons. You run into a person who's suffering from a personality disorder, and if you can look at their life from 10,000 feet, it looks like an F5 tornado went through there. Who's your best friend? Susie. How long has she been your best friend? 3 days. Who's your best friend before Susie? Martha. How long were y'all best friends? 3 weeks. How many best friends have you had? 94. That's not the way best friends work, right? How many churches have you been a member of? 14. How many jobs have you had? 19. People who have personality disorders have difficulties relating to other persons. Now what happens is, because of something going on, either a broken brain or mental or maladaptive behavior, their sense of who they are come from how everybody else is. And so they have a super intense emptiness that is only fulfilled through other people. One guy described it as like having a hole in the middle that the cold wind blows through. And so I get who I am based on who you are to me. What's your name? Griffin. With an N or a TH? N. Not like the mythological animal, but the guy. Okay, so Griffin. Griffin and I are best friends. We're best buddies. And I feel so cool when I'm friends with him. I'm going to buy him a shotgun so we can duck hunt together. We don't duck hunt. Well, I'll buy you a boat. Now you duck hunt. Well, I buy him a shotgun. I buy him a boat. I buy him a truck. I get him a retriever. I book him a hunt to Missouri. Well, I'm lavishing this stuff on Griffin, and he doesn't have that kind of money, and he doesn't do it back for me, and all of a sudden, I'm the only giver in this relationship. And I can't believe I've done all this stuff for you. You've done anything for me. Griffin said, what did I do? That's the way it works. They overinvest, and then when you don't reciprocate, they throw you to the wolves. Or, I bought him a shotgun, bought him a boat, bought him a truck, bought him a dog. We've been duck hunting in Missouri every year. I wonder how squirrely I could act and he'd still be my friend. So, next time I go duck hunting, I'll shoot his dog. And if he forgives me, look, I can't believe all of a sudden you break our friendship over a stupid dog. And all of a sudden, they push you away to see how loyal you'll be. And their view of who they are comes from who you think they are. And if you abandon them, or you challenge them, or you disappoint them, you're Satan. And it happens that fast. And people who struggle with this, they glow in the dark. Because all you got to do is look at the history of their relationships, and it is a path of destruction. People with psychotic disorders have trouble having relationships with reality. They don't perceive reality like we perceive reality. Sometimes they suffer from delusions. A delusion is an internal, fixed, firm belief that no amount of logic, no amount of talk, no amount of resources, no amount of facts can dissuade them. I ran into a guy at my internship as a grad student. I went to grad school late, so I'm like in my late 20s, early 30s, but I'm still a relatively young man. And I've got to do 18 weeks at Marshall and Jackson County Mental Health Center. I show up first day. A little tie, practical shoes, button-down shirt. I sit in this room with an 82-year-old psychiatrist interviewing a guy who came in and sat like this, like he was wearing a straitjacket. His wrists were too big to put a single pair of cuffs on. We're talking just like you and I are talking, and he tells this psychiatrist he's a 400-year-old FBI agent. I'm a brand new grad student. I can fix this. The country's only been here 200 years. You can't be a 400-year-old FBI agent. He goes, well, I said I was 400 years old and an FBI agent. Try to take better notes. Nothing I can say can change what this guy thinks about that. We got a guy in Huntsville, everybody knows him, his name is Frankie Hopkins. He believes he wrote every song that Van Halen plays on the radio. He can quote them. He knows the guitar riffs. He believes he gets a royalty check from Van Halen, but the government steals it from him every week from his post office. And it's been going on for 30 years. He has a delusion. Now, just a caveat on the thing, my very first day in mental health as an intern, for whatever reason, dude man sitting in a chair, Dr. Trainer says something he didn't like, he springs out of this chair, lands on her, straddles her, and starts raining the thunder. I put him in the corner, put an arm lock on him, locked him down till security got there. I thought, well, I just got kicked out of the grad program. I feel like I'm going home at the end of the day. So they call me into the office. I'm standing there, the director of the place goes, so, Mr. Jones, we understand you bring a certain skill set to our facility. I said, no. I just got a hobby. He goes, don't feel compelled to wear a tie and wear practical shoes. We have work for you. So I earned my master's degree as the bouncer at Marshall Jackson Health Center. Every obsessive, every oppositional defiant, every intermittent explosive disorder, every combative, I got to put hands on. It was a very fun way to earn your master's degree. The other part of people who have struggles with psychoticism or reality is sometimes they suffer from hallucinations. A delusion is an internal thing. A hallucination feels like an external thing. And it can be experienced with all 5 senses. You can see things that aren't there, smell things that aren't there, taste things that aren't there, feel things that aren't there, and hear things that aren't there. Now, the difference between an illusion and a hallucination is an illusion is a misinterpretation of something. I walk in here and the lights are dim and I see these lights silhouetted. I could come up with the idea there's a vampire hanging upside down because I've watched enough of those movies, right? That's an illusion. I misinterpret something. Soon the lights come on, I go, oh, that's cool. A hallucination is I see a dragon weaving out and forth into the rafters and he turns and talks to me and you guys can't hear it. Look up schizophrenia on TED Talks. There's a young lady at Penn State. She's an astrophysicist. She's in her middle 20s. And somewhere in the middle of her beginning of her freshman year in college, she started having hallucinations. Called her mom, said, Mom, I'm seeing, had enough insight. Say, Mom, I'm seeing things that aren't real. Mom said, don't tell anybody, embarrass your sister. And so she goes on fighting this thing till she has a psychotic break. What she sees is giant spiders. And when they move, the joints in their legs sound like children laughing. Very regularly, she's followed by the clown from It. And in the middle of her presentation, they go, oh yeah, and the clown is in the audience. And everybody goes, and he's not there. She knows he's not there, but he's so real that she can feel him touch her. Imagine trying to do your astrophysics homework with that going on. And then sometimes you have voices in your head. And the voices that come to these people are never good voices. They don't go, hey, you're a nice guy, and darn it, people like you. It's you're pathetic, you're a loser, you're going to die, your parents have cancer, you're going to hell, the demons are eating your brain. And it's miserable. Now, nothing, as in absolutely nothing I can prescribe you will make those voices go away. It may quieten them down, it may slow them down. Nothing I can give you to make that go away. But occasionally, a person can take a hit of meth and there are no voices. That's why about 90% of your mentally ill people also are comorbid for drug use. Because they got to find some relief somewhere. We walk into a room full of cops and we teach CIT, and we say, how many people here think by the end of this week we can get you to smoke meth? And the cops will cuss you to your face. There's no way. We let them listen for an hour and a half to iPod with voices in their head. They have to fold an origami puzzle. They have to do a word search. They have to fill out a job application. They have to do a mental status exam. They have to pass a sobriety test. They have to walk into a room, get the hours of the library, come back out and write them down. And after an hour and a half of voices in their head that they know aren't real because they're listening to them on their iPods, we say, how many of you guys, if this is the only way to make them stop, would use meth? 100%. So when you see people who are using drugs, the first thing is not to ask what's wrong with you. The first thing may be to ask what's happened to you. Because if your relationship with the reality was different than my relationship with the reality, if you saw things that weren't there, heard things that weren't there, felt things that weren't there, smelled things that weren't there, and tasted things that weren't there, and you couldn't tell the difference. Remember, the more there's lack of insight, the deeper the mental illness goes. And it's not an either or thing. Some people go, hey, I know these aren't real. But they're always there. Are you sure you don't see them? And so when you have people with those kind of things, they're living in a tormented state that you just can't understand that. And that's why a lot of these people kill themselves. Most people who kill themselves don't want to die. They just want the pain to end. And we'll talk about suicide later if we have a chance. And then you have your neurodevelopmental disorders, and it's basically a function of age. The brain didn't get old enough or the brain got too old. Now, I don't talk about substance disorders as a mental illness. I believe at some point it progresses into an illness, but I believe it starts out with self-efficacy and self-control. I believe it's all trauma-based, and if we have time to talk about that, we can. So, when you start talking about the Christian and mental illness, it's first of all, we as Christians got to understand that there are some people whose behavior they can't control. And if they can't control their behavior, the God of the universe will do what is just. He takes care of people who can't help themselves. He takes care of people who are innocent. Now, sometimes they're dangerous, but they're still innocent. My wife has a little Spanish water dog named Oreo. If you're not familiar with Spanish water dogs, we didn't buy this one. We're fostering it. We can't afford to buy one. But a Spanish water dog is smart. It's like having a 4-year-old and a velociraptor at your house. She has 150-word vocabulary. We have to spell words around her. If you say the wrong thing, frisbee, bubbles. She loves to chase bubbles. Snack, bedtime. Talk about, she knows what you're talking about. It's really, and she's precious. Little fuzzy looking little dust mop looking little dog. Chase a frisbee till she falls over. If she gets rabies, is she an evil dog? She's still Oreo. She's still our pet, and we still love her. She didn't turn into a wolf. She didn't turn into a werewolf. Now she has to be in a cage. Now she has to be contained. Now she has to have some treatment. She's innocent, but she's a victim of something she can't control. Does that help make sense of some of this stuff? Now, when you talk about my definition for mental illness, self-insight, self-regulation, delayed gratification, impulse control, motivation, and empathy. Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. Inherent to the Christian ethic is my ability to have a good relationship with me. Because if I don't know how to be compassionate to me, I don't know how to be compassionate to you. If I don't know how to treat myself right, I don't know how to treat you. If I'm too elevated in my view of self, I'm a narcissist. If I'm too low in my elevation of myself, then I'm codependent or a dependent personality disorder, and I don't know how to treat you. But when I have a healthy understanding of I'm created in God's image, and Jesus died for me, and I can superimpose that value to you, I know how to treat you. And people who can't not do those things are probably spiritually and mentally ill. And people who choose not, or haven't matured enough, or are maladaptive and won't do those things, then that's not mental illness, that's a behavioral issue. Does that make sense, that distinction, a little bit? Okay, we got 4 minutes for the official end time, so I'm going to take a breath and let you ask any questions, and when we come back, we'll look at Romans chapter 12 and kind of walk through that. But are there any questions? And if you have a question, you don't want to ask it out loud, write it down, and hand it to Joey, and we'll try to handle it. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible for someone to have a delusion where they know it's not real, but they still feel it's real, like a normal delusion?
Yeah. I mean, it's like those of you who are afraid of heights. You know the bridge is not going to collapse, but you're not going to walk across it. You see 900 cars go across. Nah, I'm not going over that bridge. It feels so real that you can't fight your way past it. And sometimes it's some reality testing, especially if a delusion is linked to an anxiety. The only way to deal with an anxiety is to confront the anxiety. Joey, can I take 10 minutes and do some anxiety stuff? So let's talk about panic attacks or anxiety, okay? Anybody ever have a panic attack? Oh, wow. So how does it feel when you have a panic attack? You feel like you're dying. Specifically, your heart rate changes. Your breathing changes. You get this goofy feeling in your stomach like you're going to blow hot chunks. And then your muscles tighten up. Your hands either get sweaty or they get cold, and your eyes dilate, and there's pressure in your head. Did you miss anything? All right. When that happens to you, is your body working properly?
No.
Yes. Your body is working as it was designed by God. God says, hey, body, when you get a signal from the brain that says, danger, danger, Will Robinson, you need to be alert, you need to be motivated, and you need to be strong. How do I get alert, motivated, and strong? Well, my body says, chemical cocktail of hormones. What's the quickest way to the bloodstream? The belly. Oxytocin, adrenaline, norepinephrine. All this stuff hits my stomach. And then, because I got all this junk in my stomach, my heart said, hey man, I got to spread that stuff out. My lungs go, hey man, that heart's beating fast, let's keep it. And all of a sudden this stuff feels, and my body's doing what my body's designed to do. We do not run because we're afraid. We tell people we're afraid because we ran. Running is a decision that's made way back here. We call it rapid unconscious cognition. And sometimes our brain bypasses the prefrontal cortex and makes decisions for us. If I'm standing here and my friend Griffin stands up like he's going to hit me, my brain will take over. It doesn't mean my brain makes good decisions, but my brain won't let me turn my back to him. My brain won't backpedal. My brain will step into him because I'm not giving him a free shot. My brain overrides that. That doesn't mean it's smart. He's bigger than I am, he's younger than I am, he's twice my size, half my age, means nothing. But my brain's not gonna, my brain will make a decision right there. Now, however that works out, it works out. but it has nothing to do with my bravery. My brain said, do it. If we blow something up in one of the air vents, every one of your brains will do this before you can think about it. Why? That's the rapid unconscious cognition. Now this gentleman right here stands up and says, I'm going to hit you. My brain will head for that door. This is what we call artificial distance. He has to do two things before I can do one. I like those odds all the time. If I'm going to pat you down or interview you, you're going to do it being a 2-to-1 relationship. If I wrestle with you, I'm going to put you in a position where you do 2 for every one of my 1. Why? I like those odds. My brain doesn't care if I'm scared of him or not. If he stands up and is aggressive, my brain says he's got to come out of a pew, over a pew, and around this. Got him all day. I'm gone. And it has nothing to do with me being afraid. My brain just operates that way. So when something in your brain tells you danger, your brain takes over. Now when your brain takes over, most of the time it's doing a good job. If I'm walking through the woods and a bear steps out, I don't want this part of my brain to work. Do you think that's a brown bear or a cinnamon bear? I wonder if that bear been hibernating. Is that berries in his teeth or blood? I don't want that part of my brain working. I want this part of my brain to go, bear! And whatever I do, whether it's dance with the beast or run from the beast, I want to be on autopilot messing with the animal. But when my brain says, oh, I got to give a report. My stepdad just called. I got to talk to a girl. If your brain says something's dangerous, it's really not dangerous, your body doesn't care. And once the brain says danger, heart, lungs, chemical hormones. And by the way, if I decide I've got to run from this guy or fight this guy, my brain may go, you know, those 3 tacos you had will do you no good in this one. Because you'll get rid of it. I got to run a mile to get rid of this guy. Well, I can't have those pizzas with me, and they'll come out one way or the other. That's why you get. But your body's making a decision that says, you don't need this. Hey, never scare a buzzard. They'll give you the whole load, dude. Don't ask me how I know. I know. And I'm bald. It's a nasty feeling. But so when you have a panic attack, the first thing you have to do is go, you know what? My body's designed by God. And God is telling my body, hey, it's time to go to work. And whether it's face a trauma, whether it's deal with a depression, whether it's an angry boyfriend, an angry spouse, a bully at school, take a test, talk to a girl, or give a last to leader speech, when your brain says, hey, this is stressful, your body responds to that. And as soon as you make peace with the body, my body doesn't like me crossing this bridge. I'm scared of heights. That bridge is going to fall. Okay, if the bridge were to fall, my body's ready for me to swim. If the bridge were to fall, my body's ready for me to run the other way like Indiana Jones. Cool. Now, you can decide, I'm not going to go across the bridge. Now, not going across the bridge cost me my job, cost me my relationship, cost me my friendship. I'm going to have to decide what's more important. Some things are worth the risk. And you'll be surprised that by the time you start walking across the bridge, that anxiety will start going away. You have to walk across the whole bridge. Take 3 steps and go back. I'm going to stay in this situation 10 more minutes, and then I'm going to leave. And as you start teaching yourself, hey, you know what? My body interpreted something as dangerous and it really wasn't dangerous. We call it the fight-flight response. It's technically fight, flight, or freeze. Everybody freezes. Some of us freeze for a billionth of a nanosecond. And some of us lock up, you know, like that. We all freeze. But when it comes time to fight or flight, the question I ask myself, is there anybody here I need to whip? No. Is there anybody here I need to run screaming from? No. Okay, my body's overreacting to this because my brain's in the dangerous. And the more you expose yourself to the thing that makes you anxious, the less that anxiety goes away. And it's almost predictable. John Conley calls it ambivalence. I'm aware of the sensation in my body right now, so what? I start craving French fries. And if you push French fries away, what do French fries do? They come back. And Google shows them to you on your phone. And there's Facebook post about French fries. They don't remember I need a receipt every time I pump gas, but they're going to, anyway. But if I go, hey, I acknowledge I'm craving French fries. Guess what just happened to that craving? I quit having a fight with it. I embraced it. I leaned into it. Got it. I'm scared of the dark. I'm scared of public speaking. I'm scared of this situation. Once you tell your brain, got the message, your brain quits bugging you about it. Your brain just wants to be heard. Period. And that's even with unresolved emotional trauma. If you don't address things that are emotionally unfinished business, it's going to show up as a backache, a headache, a sinus infection, a chronic thing. You're going to have some kind of diagnosis that the doctors can't figure out, but it looks like some kind of super exotic disease, but you don't have an MRI or CT scan to prove it. That's your emotion saying, hey man, you're not paying attention to me, and I'm going to get your attention. Unresolved emotions manifest themselves in physiological sickness or illness. Did that help? Very brave of you to ask that question, by the way. Any other questions? Yes?
What about intrusive thoughts and how they produce the same panic attack?
Okay, so the intrusive thought things, you do what we call habituation. Okay, so when you think about, most of our intrusive thoughts come with a fear. That fear locks into a catastrophic event, and that catastrophic event makes it just stay there. Where you got to grab that thing instead of push it away, grab it and roll around and look at it. You know, spiders. I'm scared of spiders. What if a spider gets on me? If a spider gets on me, I could get bit. I won't have superpowers. My arm will rot off. Well, now wait a minute. Will a spider really do that? Well, maybe one, maybe a brown recluse needs to be the size of a tennis ball. Okay. Do you like crab legs? Yeah, what's the difference in a crab and a spider? A crab is bigger and creepier. But you give me a bucket of butter, we'd be friends all day. Okay? And all of a sudden, this implicit idea that this is bad or this is nasty or this is dangerous doesn't really hit reality. It's an implicit belief, not a real belief. And so once I grab it and go, this is what I feel, this is what I know, you take those intrusive thoughts and you lean into them. You explore them. Would I really steal my neighbor's cat and barbecue it? No. Why? Well, I love cats, I just can't eat a whole one. You know, that kind of stuff. And so once you have an intrusive thought, we push them away rather than grab them and go, oh, I've got a spirit of love, power, and of a sound mind. I can look at this thing and tell whether it's really scary or not. My wife was weed eating the other day. This summer, I'm not rock climbing, I'm not bow fishing, I'm not weed eating. And by the way, I'm not tying ties. Wonderful summer. Well, I'm over here doing something else. She's running the weed eater. She screams, leaps into the air, and there's a snake apparently in the path of the weed eater. I go over there, and it's a very large, glorified earthworm. I mean, it wouldn't even hardly qualify as a snake. It was a little snake. Well, I grabbed him, dropped him in a bucket. She's over there guarding me with the weed eater. Babe, come over here, look in this bucket. Ooh, tell me why you're afraid of the snake. No language. All back part of your brain. So, no. Tell me why you're afraid of the snake. Well, it could be venomous. Let's look at him. Is there anything on your body he's big enough to bite? No. What color is he? Look at the shape of his head. Look at the shape of his eyes. Does he have a pit for a pit viper? No. What do you think about this snake? He's harmless. Yes. You want to touch it? No. Cut your eyebrows off this weed eater if you put that snake on me. But made her look at the snake, and now it's, oh, this thing I'm running from screaming, I've now identified, looked at, colored it, and it's not a thing of terror. That's what you do with intrusive thoughts. Now, the more severe the OCD is, the harder that game is to play. But it takes a lot of practice. Anxiety, fear, and worry is the name of a book. It's a British couple that treats OCD, and basically they talk about leaning into your fear and testing it with reality. Basically some old school systematic desensitization. But instead of pushing those fears away, we get them and we look at them. And systematic desensitization works. It lowers our tolerance to sin, and it lowers our tolerance to other things. Okay? Any other questions?
Can you describe, I want to step out of the realm a little bit. You know, we think about PTSD and people that have been in wars and battles and bad situations, but can you develop that more for?
Sure. So this brain that is looking for danger and will give me a panic attack when it says something is dangerous. Okay, it's a generalizing mechanism. It's searching the environment. And my brain takes that which is similar and treats it the same. So if I get stung by a hornet, I'll dodge a housefly. If I'm scared of snakes, I'll chop their garden hose with that hoe. If I got bit by a Doberman, I'll be nervous around a Jack Russell. Because my brain simply says, oh, that was similar, I know how this works. So if you had an abusive stepfather and he yelled at you, I'm 35 years old working in my office and the new manager comes in and yells, I'm not hearing that manager, I'm hearing my abusive stepfather. And the brain takes anything that is similar and responds to it at the same level that we used to survive the situation. Well, did you really survive the situation? Yeah, you're here, aren't you? All human behavior is adaptive. I do what I do because it works for me. Now, it may not have been ideal, it may not have been optimal, but the simple fact that I'm still on the planet means it works at some level. So anytime post means after. Traumatic is anything outside your realm of normal. Stress is the stress you experienced in the trauma, but you're experiencing the same level of stress after the trauma. Post-traumatic stress. Now, all of us have post-traumatic stress injuries. It doesn't have to become a disorder. Okay? Life's a contact sport. If you've been in ministry very long, been a parent or a first responder, you have post-traumatic stress injuries. They don't have to become disabilities. If it interferes with your ability to function, have relationships, or recreate, then it becomes a disorder. But the simple fact that some things trigger your mind, I call it time travel. I'm walking around in, 2022, and something can happen, and I can go all the way back to when they just changed an intersection in Huntsville. They widened Pratt Avenue, made it a 4-lane, and built a new bridge and extended it. Before then, it used to come over the railroad tracks under a curve. When 9/11 happened, I got called out with SWAT. SWAT didn't show up, it was just me, a murder-suicide. A guy killed his girlfriend, killed himself, and I had to go to a school and tell a 6-year-old boy, your mom's not gonna pick you up today. Got back to the office and my engine hadn't cooled, and they paged me out again. And I show up at Pratt Avenue, and a 26-year-old school teacher had whiskey throttled her motorcycle and jumped the railroad tracks and hit a telephone pole, a utility pole. Phone company rents space on the pole that belongs to the utility company. Her body's over here. I see the back of her head down. Traffic is blocked. There's a motorcycle helmet in the intersection. I go there and pick up the helmet. Her face is still in it. Chin strap got her all the way up, had her eyes closed like a porcelain mask. Every time I go through that intersection, I see that young lady's face. I don't slam the brakes, I don't get out of my lane, I don't black out. It's just not something you forget. Now that they changed the intersection, I don't see it anymore because it's different now. They moved the pole. I look at the pole and see the bent sign. Pole's gone. It's gone. Now, it never interfered with my ability to drive through that intersection. It never made me avoid that intersection. It never made me not get out and walk across that intersection. It's not made me run away from my friends who have motorcycle helmets. But my brain said, hey, wow, that was fairly significant. Pretty tough day today. I remember that. But if I'm driving and approach the intersection and I see the intersection and I start to shake and I start to cry and I stop the car and I can't go through the intersection, post-traumatic stress disorder. Because in order for something to be a disorder, it must produce a dysfunction. And if it doesn't produce a dysfunction, it may be an inconvenience and it may be a problem. You can be depressed and not be dysfunctional. You can have anxiety and not be dysfunctional. So just because you have it doesn't mean there's a disorder, because you don't have a disorder unless it produces a dysfunction. Does that make sense? And so I walk outside, it can be the angle of the sun, it can be a smell, it can be the music that was in the background, it can be the barometric pressure, it can be a song on the radio. Your brain records all that. And when your brain hears something that's similar, it goes, oh, been there, done that, didn't like how it ended. And it does that on such a rapid unconscious cognition that sometimes we're unaware of it. That's why we think, that's how grief happens. You'll be sitting in a worship service and you'll sing a song and start crying. And you realize, oh wow, they sung at my grandmother's funeral. That's why I tell people, let's bury your dead at the chapel, not in your building. Because the next time you sit in this building to worship, this looks close enough that it's a box. There's dead people in those boxes. And your brain just does that. God designed it that way so your brain would learn from experience and keep you alive and protect you. And then when it gets those signals, this is something that was stressful, heart rate, vision blurs, lungs change, stomach gets all that cocktail hormone, and then sometimes you actually have a flashback where it puts you in that situation and your body's trying to recreate what it did to survive. And a lot of times post-traumatic stress is also often unfinished business. So I can take a girl that's been attacked or assaulted, and I can give her about 3 weeks in a jiu-jitsu gym, take one of our female instructors, have her pin her on the ground and let her execute a sweep, and her body will do what it wanted to do 15 years ago, and it's a done deal. Your body can get bad guys off of you, roger that, go on. Sometimes it's finishing that business for yourself that helps you overcome the post-traumatic stress. And that was a quick discussion of PS, post-traumatic stress disorder. Was enough? All right, I've extended this thing for almost 20 minutes now, so I'm done. Well, who's going to bless the burgers?
We'll have a couple of songs first.
A couple of songs, and then bless the burger, all right? And then we'll be back, and we'll try to do another session.